And we're live.
And we're live.
We're back. Do we need introductions, or are you the man who needs no introduction?
Now, I think it's known as the Donovan and Bo Show. If you don't know who we are, go watch one of the other videos.
Nice. All right. So today we figured we would talk a little bit about the magical world of FRecords. Uh, some people are, I guess, a little bit of hesitant to do some sort of scripting in there. So the idea behind this is to show you some of the main functions of the FRecord world, how you can use them to write data, update data, find data, etc. And Bo can go into a little bit of why it was built this way, the advantages of this, and why it's helpful to build a platform like this. But you
Yeah,
want
I mean, sure. Yeah, I mean, I know we said that we're going to try to do a little shorter of a video, so we won't. I won't blab too much like I usually do. But so the intention of the F record is basically an object. Sometimes it's referred to as like an active record, but the idea is that you use that object to query different buckets in the system. So it's kind of your entry point into the CRUD operations, like the insert or create, update, delete, search. So the idea is that you would use the F record, and Donovan will kind of go over it, and that's what your primary mechanism when you're in the scripting language in the F8 platform, which is heavily JavaScript. So all the majority of the platform is JavaScript. We do have some Java on the back end that most people will never see, but the idea is it's a lot of runtime configuration. Administrators can go in there, write JavaScript to do various things, and one of the most common objects that you use is that F record. And like I said, that's what you would use for getting to your data, updating data, and anything data related.
Awesome. So what I can do is I can go through and, me not being a developer, being a kind of solution architect, solution consultant, I know some basics here, but we'll go through some basics of just querying, updating, deleting. And as we go through, Bo can also highlight some of the other features in there, maybe some of the, or explain some of the data elements that are actually going on in the background. So I'm gonna find my share button. All right, so the nice part is the F record capability is applied anywhere throughout the platform. So you can build browser actions, you can build triggers, you can build REST APIs with them, or you can hit Option X, whoops, when you're on your Dreamtsoft, and you can get your scripter. This is an admin capability that allows you to do some quick and dirty scripting to test out scripts maybe before you want to go and put them into a trigger and have to create a record that meets those conditions. So it's a very good place to do some testing on your scripting and your code first, and then you can go and drop that into wherever you want that to be inserted. One of the basic things to do is just go ahead and query a table. So if I want to query the incident table, just go in and create a variable called FRecord and define that as a new FRecord. And what that is that's, and Bo, you can color this up if you want to, but that's the F8 platform creating an object. And one of the parameters, or the parameter in that creating a new F record, is the table or the bucket that you want. So I'm going to go off the incident. From here, now I have basically created a kind of container or an object on the incident bucket, and now I can tell it what to do. So if I just wanted to search and pull back every single incident record, from here, I can do FRecord search, and that's going to go out and essentially run a search command. And then from there, it's going to return every single record in that incident bucket or that incident table. And then I can iterate through each one of those with just your standard while loop and say, while there is a next record, I'm going to do this. And here I can console log out basically the value of, let's just say the number of the incident. So I will do FR, because that is still that object, dot number, and that will log out every single incident I have, the number in my table. So I hit play, and you can say that's exactly what it did. It went out to the incident table, grabbed every single record, and then iterated through each one, and then just logged it out. So from here, you can start to understand how you can start to query and manipulate data. So the search button here is, of course, just going to grab everything. But if I wanted to put a search condition in there, there's a variety of ways of doing that. So the first is just doing a fr.add search, and that's basically doing an equals. So I could say fr add search where number, and then I can just put a comma here, and then in quotes put that number. And I guess it doesn't matter what kind of quote signs I use, but I'll stay consistent. And then if I run that, it should just only return the incident 50, and it does. So this is basically where number equals a specific value. So you can, if you happen to have a choice slot where it's referencing another table, you could put a ref ID in here to get very specific. If you have categories or anything that are very specific, you can put that in there, and you have to be very specific with this because it's only going to bring back if it is that. Now, you can also do add search contains, where number contains, let's just say,
you left the S off of there.
Oh, thank you. So now I'm looking for any incident that has that where the number contains incident, and that's going to be all of them again. And there they all are. You know, you could also do something where like description contains, and I'll just put the word the in there, and then here are all of those. And if I wanted to change the console log to description, now I can see the description of all my incidents that are in there that have the word the. So as you can tell, this is, you know, some basic scripting language, but it allows a lot of flexibility when you're digitizing your workflows, because you have this flexibility to go through and query, look for specific things, look for broad things that contains. And there's a list of these, so a list of these functions that are on our wiki. So if you go to wiki.dreamtsoft and look at the FRecord, there might not be descriptions of what they do, but the name themselves should be fairly self-explanatory. So you can do a lot with that. Bo, do you have any other color just on the basic searching that you would?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that might be worth going over, I could walk you through this if you want, is the well, you could do the add search encoded. So that will use the encoded search string. So that's another kind of popular way of searching. That's what we use like in the list when we're doing the breadcrumbs and building stuff out in our condition builder. It'd probably be worthwhile showing that syntax too, because that's another way of building the search.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the fastest ways of getting an encoded search is to actually build out the query using our condition builder, and then you can copy that. So it's sort of a shortcut if you forget how the encoded search syntax should be built out. So one of the easiest ways to do that is you go into any list or go into the bucket specifically that you're looking to query, and you can then build the query. So here I have active is true, and I could do the same thing I did before where description contains, and we'll just keep the word the in there. And then I apply that filter. And then up in the URL, you can see now it is encoded. So generally what I'll do is I'll jump to another site, and then I'll just copy everything from the Q on down to the next ampersand, because that next ampersand is the next parameter. And I'll copy that and then just quickly decode it because it is encoded up there. And then I can grab this where I don't need the Q equals, but I do need that query. And now if I hit Option X again, this button over here on the right allows you to historically go back to your previous scripts. So I'll just grab the previous script I had here. And this is going to be add search encoded. And then in the quotes, I will just paste that. And so I have the brackets around it and then the brackets around each query. So now if I hit the play button and it worked, oh, and it's asking me for my semicolon, I get an error, and might be due to those brackets, additional brackets, take those out. Might be because I totally screwed something else up.
Let's walk through this.
All right.
So yeah. So it's saying something's null, so that means that function is wrong. So I think it's adding coded search. So
Oh,
yeah, easy mistake. But if you ever see anything on there like the error that's saying, right, it's pointing to your line right there.
yep.
So that's a good indicator on line 2. Hey, something's wrong here.
Mhm.
And then saying null is not a function, which it essentially means you have an empty object and you're trying to call something off of it. So in this one, it would imply, since it's fr.add search encoded, that fr is null and you're trying to call something off a null. So that's a pretty easy indicator of, oh, hey, I have the wrong function here.
Gotcha. So hit the play button again now that I changed it to add encoded search. And there we go. I'm console logging the description. I do the same thing with number. Or if I wanted to, I could add the description right after it. And then there's each incident with the description afterwards.
So yeah, I mean, if you were to look at the encoded search, basically what it is there's 3 parameters on it. Sometimes you'll actually see a 4th, which contains the display value. But when you're in script like this, you don't really need the display value. On something like a list, you often want the display value. So it's like the friendly version of it. But if you look at what Donovan posted or pasted in there, you'll see the first one has 4 parameters. The second one has 3 parameters. So it's basically slot, and then the operator, and then the value. And then the 4th one is an optional display value. And then we use just a JavaScript array. It's super simple, super consistent across the board, where you could just chain these arrays, just like math and the evaluating expression with parentheses. It's going to evaluate these things in the proper order. You could, if you wanted to, also put a or in there. By default, if you don't have any like a logical condition like an and or an or, it will just automatically and them all together. Like they all need to exist. But for this example, Donovan, yeah, right where that comma is, just do comma, and then do quote, capital or, comma. And what this is doing is basically now you just created an or as opposed to an and, right? So the active is true or the condition contains the. So sometimes you could do the same thing when you're building the FRecord through functions in JavaScript, and we have I believe a lot of it's documented on the wiki, wiki.dreamtsoft.com. But it could sometimes it can get pretty hairy and pretty big when you're doing it all through programming. And sometimes it actually makes sense, like, hey, I'm just going to build this encoded search, this JSON, and that's what I'm going to use for the search, as opposed to programmatically trying to build the search up with a bunch of function calls.
Gotcha. Now, I know in the past you've told me this fr.number is a little bit of a cheater way to get the value you're looking for. And I think one of the other ways to do it is to do a get value number.
Yep.
And it'll do the same. Now,
yep.
Obviously it does the same thing, but is there any advantage to doing the get value versus just the dot notation?
Yeah, I mean, there is, and for this video, I won't get too much in depth because it'll probably go over most people's heads. But when you're doing fr.description, that's actually returning an object, not an actual string, because there's an underlying object, an underlying class that's dealing with that slot. In this particular case, description is a string. but there's, often things you could do off of a string, or off of a different slot. So for example, we have a URL slot that you could define on a bucket, and there's two ways to render that URL. When you're looking at the attributes, you can say, I just want a URL box, or I want a URL box and a label. And what that means is that you could put in the URL, you could put in a label, and then by default, the label is used as opposed to the URL. That is stored actually in JSON. But when you have that and you're doing the FRecord against it, it'd be fr.url. If you call that, it's actually going to return, the JSON string, because that's slot is a kind of a complex slot where it contains like I said, the label and the URL. It's not just a simple string. In that particular case, there's a slot object that's URL, and you could do fr.url or fr.myslot.getURL. So when you see something like fr.description, that is an object, and there could be like supporting functions that are off of that, versus fr.getValue is actually just going to get the string value of it.
Gotcha. So let's actually look at that. So we have a table in the system called leads. Actually, I'll do is I'll comment this out, because I don't think there's a description on a lead, but I do believe there's a number. No, there's not a number. But I believe there is. Well,
name.
Is it name? I know there's a URL in there. Okay, so there's all the leads we have in the system with name. And I think there's a slot called LinkedIn, which is a URL link. And yep. This is a really good example of what Bo was talking about. So this is a slot that has two values in it. It's got the label and the URL. Now, you said there was a get, I believe there's a get URL.
Yeah, so if you do another console log, let's just do on the next line, get dot LinkedIn. So we'll just do that right now we'll walk through this line by line, right? So okay. If you log that, it will return the same value.
Yep.
This one's just, it's not formatted like the other one was formatted. Okay. But it's still a JSON string with a JSON object with two keys, a label and a URL. But since that's actually an object, you can actually do LinkedIn.getURL, capital U, capital R, capital L, open, close, because it's a function off of there.
Yep.
And run that, right? And what that'll do is just give you the URL. So in the system, the different slot types you can have different getters and setters on them. So when you see fr dot and then like LinkedIn, you're actually getting the slot type. And when you console log that or do things that will basically get the value of it, it's going to default to kind of turning into a string. But we often use that get value. That's like, hey, a definite, hey, I want the string value of this. I don't want the object of this.
Gotcha. Okay. So, this is obviously writing out to the console log here in the script, the scripter area. If you also want to test out, the console log or put this in an action really quickly, and I've covered this in some of the other videos, but I'll just grab this script. So you can create an action, and for instance, I'll just do this on the incident table, and it's called a browser action. And that's basically a button. We'll say print to console on the incident form, on the details. I'm going to do a run script, and that's that same thing that I had before. I'm just going to paste this in there. And this is just doing anything but pasting all of the leads. So it's not even dealing with the incident table. It's looking at the lead table. It's going to console log all of those values out. And the way you can display that, and this is good for debugging and making sure that you're getting the values you're looking for. Now that I've saved that, it's a primary button. I'll just call it log. So I can look at it.
I think the other thing we should show off too, we actually added a new thing called call to action underneath that where. Let's just set that to be call to action as opposed to primary on the right hand side there. Yeah.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
then you can put an icon on there too,
Okay.
just to get the fullness
Gotcha.
of it.
Is there a log? Is there a,
Oh, do the dumpster fire.
oh yeah. There we go.
Yeah, dumpster fire.
All right. So now we have a button on the incident form that if I go to the incident form and so I'll just go to this 100% awesomeness incident. And so you can see in the upper right, this is the call to action. And this compared to, this is a secondary button, and then a primary button would be right next to these ellipses, but it's not highlighted in blue. And it's also, it doesn't have the square around it. The call to action buttons are exactly what they are. They're what you should be doing on this form, essentially directing your eye to it. Anyways,
Yeah, there's
ahead.
there's three. Yeah, I was going to explain. There's really the three types of behaviors for the button. So the call to action is like, hey, this is something you pretty much do every time. It's usually based on like, hey, I'm in this current state, and this is kind of the thing I need to do. And then there's primary. Those are like, these are things I do a lot, and I want them in my face because there's a good chance I'm going to do it. And then there's the secondary, which are under the ... That's like I usually am not going to do this, but they are there. I know they're under the ...
Perfect. So if I click this right now, it looks like it's doing nothing. And in fact, it is doing something, but there's two things I need to do. First of all, we log out our consoles just like you'd expect in JavaScript to the console log. So I can open up my console. So you can do the same thing by going into Chrome and then going to View, Developer, Console, or Developer Tools, or JavaScript Console. It'll pop open this, and then you can go to Console. I always just hit Command Option J on the Mac. That pops this open. Give myself a little room, but I'm not yet in debugging mode. So you go to anywhere in Dreamtsoft, just make sure you click on the Dreamtsoft screen, Control-Shift-D. And you'll notice this little bug pops up in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, when I click the log button, it will run through and it will go and obviously run some other commands here in JavaScript that it's going to log out. But you can see where I'm logging out all of these LinkedIn values. So if you were scripting this button to go out and take a value from the incident form and maybe write it to the lead form or a problem record or a knowledge record, but you didn't want to go inserting new records, you just wanted to verify the values you were getting, this is where you can log those out in your JavaScript console. You can even take an object like, that URL, right now I'm using the get URL, but it would print the whole object out if necessary because you're just logging it to the console.
Yeah, so essentially when you turn on that debugging, it's saying, hey, any scripts that are running in the back end that are doing any kind of console logging, it'll actually send it through an active WebSocket, and then it'll just echo it on your browser console. So it's a pretty easy and slick way to get feedback both from the client, which is the browser. That's obvious easy because you're there. But in the situation like the Dreamtsoft platform, we have it's a subsystem. There's clusters, multiple nodes running. In order to basically get those log messages to come back to the browser, it just works out pretty well, and it really helps when you're kind of more in the advanced writing scripts, when to see what's going on type of situation. Perfect.
So, like I said at the beginning, these can be used, these scripts can be used all over the place. Obviously in Scripter, this is where we did some querying. If I wanted to write or change the value of every single one of these leads, I could do that as well, where I could do fr.linkedin.url is equal to. Now this, if I do this, this will actually go through and place this in the object, but it's not going to update that record until I went through and basically said, okay, now that my object is set, now that all the values are in there, Now I want to go back and update that. And then I can go through and hit this button, and that will go through and update all of my values on those records. So, now you can see how you can do some very quick querying, although I removed the encoded search here, and then iterate through each one that I get returned. And then if I want to update a value on that, I can grab that. Or if it was something just like, fr.name, and I wanted to change the name to Bob Smith, then that would go through and update the name of that lead to Bob Smith every single time. And then it'll just loop through there until it has no more records to update.
That's bad syntax there.
How so?
Just name equals Bob Smith,
Oh,
not.
thank you. That is horrible syntax.
That's okay.
I appreciate that.
I will end it like this. Yeah.
That works.
Okay. Perfect.
So, I think that's good.
Done.